Victoria 3. We have another interesting document about the art of Victoria, summarizing what we already know about it and what was mentioned in the PDXCon. So let's have a look together and also speak about the general art of the Victorian Age. That was a very mixed art and a very interesting art, which is why the art of Victoria as a game is also a very interesting mix. Here you can see like a typical mix of the art of the Victorian Age. There's colonial art, as you can see here. There's the classic royal art. And then there's nature. Nature is definitely something very important. Then there's this man here is looking like a city laborer, something like this. And there's some things still missing that we'll probably see in the further pictures there. So, as you can see here, colonial art was some big thing, and sometimes rebellion and also first steps to the freeing of slaves were something that was in the spirit of the times. Even though normal workers often didn't have it much better than slaves, they at least had their freedom, the freedom of choice. And as you can see here, the chains are crushed and the people are freed. There's a rebellion, probably maybe one of the Haitian rebellions, to free the island. And we have here rather rich Victorian burghers in the typical attire of the well-off. But you can also see here at that door in the background, you can see probably, I don't know if they are feeding the birds, the pigeons, or if they are actually beggars, because there was also a lot of poor people in the Victorian Ages, as with industrialism, classes and class differences rather were made bigger than were made smaller. The concentration of capital and wealth was accelerating already. Here we can see first details from the map. There's early footage under development. You can see that there's a detailed terrain map. Even though it's not that impressive yet, you can see that it has a lot of detail. You can see woods, you can see some borders, you can see roads between cities, you can see the cities. Bigger cities have more houses. You can see there's a railroad there. There's some fields, there is rivers, all kinds of things like that. On the right side you can see already the date and interest groups, commanders, markets, colonies, states. So these are probably the core things you'll have to consider while playing. Then here you can see we're in the new world of Peru. The former one was in France, now it's in Peru, it's in South America, and you can see that you have relations there. There is a part of the Peruvian market and the Andes, and there's the big mountains that look very nice with the clouds above it. And there's a settlement rather not on the top of the mountains, but like in a valley accompanying the mountains. And in that, there's the market, where we have at that moment 100% market access in the strategic region, the Andes. You can see this is probably from the same game, as this is our home, and this is something that we control or have relations with. French relations with Peru, neutral, threat towards Peru, unworried, threat towards France, unworried. So it's a very, very natural world. It is definitely in the style of the Victorian paintings. Victorian paintings were a broad mixture of, as we've already said, about painting nature, it's about painting royalty, it's about painting the new burgher class, and it's also about still the remnants of romantic art and also showing industry. Like a lot of the paintings there were about showing the progress. Steam trains, steamboats, railroads, factories, all kinds of things like that were big things in art. Here you can see a menu of institutions here. In that case, we're looking at the opposition. There's some of the petite bourgeoisie, the smaller burghers, the Catholic Church, the industrialists, the armed forces, and the intelligentsia. So a lot of people, and you can probably see with these little icons here explaining their actual agendas and maybe also what they have in common with each other. Here's the detailed view of a market, in that case Mazovia, the Russian market. You can see it has an infrastructure rating that has currently no infrastructure. It's an isolated state region. It's basically comparable to like playing something like Madagascar in Victoria 2. The infrastructure usage of the zero infrastructure is 34. There's some taxation and a lot of expenses. There's no market access to see here. And you can see there are different buildings and the number of them. So you will have... They said there's over 50 buildings, so that's probably part of that, 50 different buildings. And you can stack these buildings up. That's what this tells us. Then you have a certain standard of living. And you can see that a couple of them are struggling. A lot of them are impoverished, and even more of them are secure. So half of them are secure, the rest are struggling or impoverished of the population of Mazovia in that overview. There are nearly 2 million people living there with a growth rate of around 8,000 probably per year. There's 215,000 peasants of that, and there's only 3 unemployed. This means like any growth you have there will probably be good for the region. Any growth of anything. It's about production, 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 and if you're still missing standard of living there, you just need more. Send people in the fields, produce more to give these people at least food and maybe clothing for the impoverished. Then there's some ambience, as you can see here. If you scroll out a little bit, you can see that it is a mixture between a map, because like you can see the writing of the actual states here. So it's nearly transforming into a map. You can see still these states, but also you can see the clouds above, and it slowly transforms to a map. Here we have a harbor in Italy, that's Naples in that case. You can see how the sea glitters, everything like that. It's a nice combination. You can see that you have trees, you have a little bit of flat land here, you have some mountains, and how it all connects to the sea with a harbor. Here you can see how cultural differences are displayed. There's some portraits here that probably show the stereotypes that you would see here, or it may be also the rulers of, I don't know, maybe that's a kind of a Turkish country and that's France. There's a comparison here in that menu of the economic data: population, literacy, standard of living, state religion, primary cultures, arable land, and GDP, of course. And then you have some kind of military points and navy points here. And that is probably the rank in the world. Like France, probably a superpower because of that. There's the wings here, and I don't know, maybe Turkey here is only rank 78. Yeah, so it's actually not a Turkish flag, I'm sorry. I looked it up because it's so curious. Like it's a flag of Egypt that only existed for like 7 to 8 years, somewhere between 1910 and 1925 or something like that. So it's Egypt here. It's definitely Egypt. So it's a later place we're in, and it's Egypt. Now, if you zoom out, you have that view, and that's a fantastic view. It shows the world as a map. It also has the sizes of the continents in the map view that you had in the Victorian Age. Because if you use geographical dimensions, then Africa would be even larger. But this is a typical map of the Victorian Age, as the size relations strike you. I mean, comparably Russia is very big, comparably Europe is relatively big, and comparably things like China here and India are relatively, India is relatively small, China is relatively big. But of course, as the great Qing Empire is so big, that makes it even bigger, right? But there's definitely some geographical misrepresentations here. These are, though, very similar to the historical maps of that time. And the map, of course, looks like hand-painted. It looks beautiful. Here you have a view of the South Pacific, the Atlantic Ocean, and Brazil. That's the political view, and it looks just very clean and nice. Here you have like the bigger world map that you can see in a political view, and there's a lot of like white countries still. They're probably not in some kind of alliance, so I guess these colors will be some kind of alliance view. So there was not a lot to be seen already, but enough that you can see that it really reminds a mixture of Crusader Kings 3 and Victoria 2 in the menus and everything. So they kept some things, continued some things, but also improved some critical things in the map view. I've already heard some critique that the map view is like underwhelming, but I'm pretty sure that they will adapt that to something a little bit more refined. I mean, there's just something a little bit grisly about these pictures still, and maybe things like the fonts and things like that are not yet, they don't have that feel of being finished. And that's why it's also called early footage under development, because that will be improved. And the core of Victoria has also never been something like have the perfect font or have it to be very beautiful. The core of Victoria has always been the mechanics for me. It is just beautiful mechanics to be able, or to at least try to simulate an economy based on the needs of a population. Not a top-down, but rather a bottom-up economy. And that is why Wiz is in charge of this, because Wiz was also forming Stellaris to the POP system. Stellaris originally was in a game-ish POP unit system, where you could move the POPs around on the planets. And then it transformed to a more a society view, a state view of a POP exists, but it is a statistic. It has no exactly clear location. But you put it in a box, for example, a planet, or you put it in a province. And there it exists, and there it has its workplace. But it's not a definite space somewhere. It is free to move around, and it is more like a classical scientific view of the thing. It has that societal touch and that connection of the economic view of the POPs and the political view of the POPs. So the POPs as a driving force in percentages, but also still not losing the POPs' individuality, as in there's different groups that have very different needs and that have very different political intentions. And this is emphasized, that you have a real global view here. Like there's a global map. That just underlines that in the Victorian Age, the global machine, if you want so, was something to rely on, and something that was interwoven inextricably with the world. Everything went global on a scale never seen before. And that to show that connection is the purpose of all of this. You can very clearly see the connections here. You can still see the individual units, the individual things that the people do here, like the fields, like the forests. But you can clearly see how the world is connected. It's through rivers, it's through railways, it's through oceans. And you can clearly see where the markets, so the concentration points are, and how they are connected. And to show these connections, as well as the society of the different states, is what this art wants to do. And once it has fulfilled that purpose, you can make it more beautiful. And that's what will happen, I think. So once everything is connected in a way that you understand the UI well, then they will look to making it all like that little bit more beautiful, to give it some kind of final touch. Like Crusader Kings 3, that just looks gloriously great. We'll follow this and avidly. Have a great time until next time, and happy gaming. This is Immanuel Can signing out. See you soon and happy gaming.